Welcome to season 2 of the LEX Podcast. This is a very exciting moment for us as we go on to build from where we left last time. LEX is leaders in employee experience, and as we have mentioned previously, experience is where we live in today. So, we've gone through in the last few months through a number of cycles with quiet quitting and all of those fancy things coming in. And the truth is still that people live in an experience economy. People turn up to work because they want to, not because they have to. And this is where the leaders in employee experience will far outperform those who treat people in a different way. Starting off season 2 is a great friend, Manisha, who's here. Manisha is the CHRO of Vinny Cosmetics, which is a KKR portfolio company. Manisha and I have previously worked together at what was then Hewitt Associates, now Aon, and known by different names for different parts of its businesses. Manisha is a very versatile HR professional. She's done various roles that many HR people don't get to do. So she's worked in the line side of the business. She's worked in consulting, and you know what? She's also been an HR tech founder. So not too many people would be in a position to give a perspective as diverse as Manisha would. Manisha, welcome to the show. Uh, Please share with our audience something more about who you are as a person.
Okay, Nishit, great to be on the show. Thanks for having me. Like you said, I'm the CHRO and ESG board committee member at Vinny. I've been fortunate, honestly, to wear three different hats, right? And all of them have primarily been very happy coincidences. I don't think there was anything very um, mindful about being, I want to do this and I want to do that, but they just sort of happen. It's pretty much exactly how my initiation into HR also took place, which was purely by chance. You see, after my bachelor's degree in math and computer applications, I wasn't really excited about going abroad for my master's degree, which is what a whole lot of my batchmates were doing back then. And I instead chose to appear for the entrance test, the MBA entrance test, which is CAT and XLRI entrance test. Fortunately, I got through, and I spent two of the best years of my youth learning and making friends, for a lifetime, actually.
And then there has been this constant kind of strive that I've seen in you to make a difference from the people perspective. So what's your take after what 20 plus years, of course, almost what 25 years in the domain? What do you see as the most successful organizations do when it comes to people?
Sure. I think that's an interesting question. In my view, the role of people in any business has always been the same, right? It's always to deliver business results and to unlock value for all in the journey. That is the primary purpose. Now, this was probably just had a limited view just from a let's unlock shareholder value. But from there, if you look at it from the ESG lens today, you also have communities built into it, right? And with ESOP plans becoming mainstream, you actually have employees who are also part of the entire value creation process right now. So there, it's literally an expansion of this definition of what people do in any business, which is primarily to create value. But this is now for everyone in that value chain. And I think a large part of this has happened primarily because you've got the adoption of technology. I'll give you an example, right? Um, what happens in any organization? You have collaboration, you have creation, and then you probably have some amount of cohesive workplace. That's how you sort of build it together. Let's take, for example, a SharePoint or a Google Doc. What we earlier used to create and then send to each other over email, today is a living document in the cloud, and you're doing it at real time, right? I think that's primarily how it's been enabled, but role of people has pretty much been the same.
There is a change, though, in the nature of relationship between the employer and the employee, right? So over a period of time, when I started my career um, at Nestle, there were a lot of people who had been working in the company for 20, 25 years. I know people who worked 35 years and then retired. That obviously doesn't happen anymore very frequently, though there is also research which says that even Gen Zs who are considered to be like a species from a different planet, if you give them a good work environment, respect, and the opportunity growth, three-fourths of them would like to stay on in the organization for a very long time. But at the same time, there's been a change in the work relationship, the relationship between the employer and the employee. How do you see that playing out over the last few years, especially after the pandemic, with a lot of kind of people being laid off, businesses kind of not doing well, and that psychological contract kind of breaking apart?
I think the role of the work has changed, not so much the role of people, right? And that lens of, earlier it used to be this a longer, and I'll give you an example of where I'm coming from. A longer tenure was probably it was the gold standard for how much knowledge or experience or how much value an employee added. But right now, the lens through which this is actually being seen is from an exposure perspective and from an experience perspective. It's being counted in the kinds of experiences you've actually had across a breadth of various roles that you've done, various geographies, and various kinds of challenges, as opposed to the duration in a particular role. So I think that fundamentally has sort of changed, right? And more people are actually seeing this actually come through. Now, whether you call it a Gen Z, a millennial, or whatever, I think we were also at some point in time youngsters, right? So we had similar kind of expectations of what we wanted. We never wanted to retire from the same place. We couldn't wrap our heads around it. There's a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more mobility, in fact, right? So if you look at it from a lens of, are people more mobile? Yes. Are people more open to opportunities? Yes. Are people open to different experiences? Yes. So the lens through which the employer-employee relationship today is seen is more about, I am a collection of experiences that have happened to me, and rather than me being in a role for a very long time.
But what about the relationship between, say, an employee and the manager? How do you see that evolving over a period of time?
I think fundamental to any employer, manager, and team member relationship is trust, and that has always remained the same, right? And if you really break it down, what is trust? Trust is it's commitment that you make and you deliver on that commitment. That's pretty much what trust is, right? Now, this seems more like a transaction, but if you look at it from a deep-rooted level, our brains and our nervous system are pretty much wired to see whether someone is trustworthy or not. Take infants, for example, or take toddlers. If someone speaks in a very soothing, calm kind of voice, instantly they are calmed down, and you know that some people have it and some people don't. And someone actually has a raised voice or angry expression on their face, we are as humans tuned to go ahead and react in three ways. We either freeze, or we fight, or we run away from there. So that's the response that we have, and that's rooted in neuroscience. Now, I know that you're taking exactly what's rooted in neuroscience and cognitive behavior, and you're using those theories to actually build your technology, whether you're using nudge or any of these things to get things moving forward. So those really are the tools that a manager today leverages and probably knows more of. And we've got this exposure, this research has come out. People are sort of building it into their ways of working. Organization behavior has sort of evolved from that thinking perspective. People are more open to an external element through coaching, right? Through having these conversations. To me, that fundamentally has changed. Our awareness levels have gone up, and our ability to leverage tech in this has gone up. Look at the tools that you currently use. You use a quick pulse check. You use a chat bot to answer basic questions, right? Or what you're doing with generative AI right now, and you're really pushing the envelope further and saying, maybe the experience between what a manager wants and what has to be delivered can be done by technology, and we make the conversations real by really speaking to each other as two humans.
So sticking on to technology, and I know you are genuinely qualified to talk about it.
Thank you.
You've run a tech platform. You've done some very good work with Bloom in terms of coming out with a report that was very, very informative. So talk us through the role of technology in creating these experiences and elevating these relationships.
Yeah. So just look at how tech has evolved, right? Especially HR tech. HR tech has evolved from, and HR as a function itself, the way it's evolved. HR as a function has evolved from being a purely compliance based function to now we're talking employee experience, which is front and center, right? We've been the whole conversation about HR needs a seat at the board is no longer, really a conversation, because several people before me and several people after me also will be right at that seat and are at that seat and are creating, right? What's changed fundamentally is how we have used or we've seen work in itself, and we've leveraged technology over there. We've moved from, say, systems of record to systems of experience. That's the entire shift that we are actually making, which is to say that, is there a process? Is there our basic processes in place? Can we outsource? Can we put payroll online? Can we automate all the transactional work that HR used to get bogged down with? Can I get a system to do that? And then can I deliver an experience to an employee? It becomes the conversation everywhere. And that's really how it's evolved in my mind, right? The second bit of it is really the interconnectedness of it, that something somewhere has an impact on something elsewhere. And that is what we are seeing as a change in the way HR professionals are also viewing work and building and leveraging technology. The third one is, how do you extend this to, say, coaching or performance management? So, fundamentally, if you look at it from a purpose, performance, and reward perspective, from the purpose point of view, your values, your workforce plan, all of those really need to come from your business plan, right? Once you've sort of broken those down into skills, experience, expertise, and preferences, you've got a workforce plan that's a living document as opposed to, say, a cost-based exercise. And that's where strategic workforce planning tools are actually making a difference. The second portion of it really is your perform portion, where you're saying these are the goals that we really want, that we've set out as an organization, and this is how we need to go ahead and deliver those. Here you have various performance management tools, whether it's Betterworks or Lattice or any of the other tools that are actually there. Those have actually come in and said, instead of this being, okay, now we open the performance management system, we fill in our goals, these are living things that are actually happening as we speak, right? Um, so you finish something, you can immediately go and put your comments over there saying, I finished this. From there, you've got your entire gaps that have been identified, and that's where coaching and your learning and development is plugging in so well through LMS. And eventually you have all of this in terms of what's in it for me, that whole discussion on what's in it for me, and your rewards platforms take center stage. In all of this, there are backend systems that are at work in terms of collaboration, in terms of communication, in terms of your culture, in terms of a quick sense check or a pulse check or any of those. All of this are, all wrapped in over there. That's how I see technology really enabling how this new breed of HR professionals are looking at work.
And where do you see the whole predictive insights and data and analytics? Like, I know you said that you come from a math background. How many times have you seen CHROs being able to produce the same kind of data that the CFO does? And what can we do about it?
One, I think we have to get comfortable. We know our stuff really well. Okay. I think what we don't, probably some, I don't mean to broad brush this to anyone really, because I think there are lots of people out there doing really, really cutting edge stuff. I think we will need to be a little bit kinder to ourselves and just say that we know what we know. We just have to change the lens of how we're viewing it. And we may have to make it more outcome focused, right? Rather than get mired in the process, we need to be looking at it from an outcome perspective. And that's fundamentally the shift that we'll need to make from how a CFO views something and how the HR person views it, right?
I was talking mainly in terms of the quality and the quantity of the data rather
Yeah.
than interpretation. So unfortunately, we still aren't at the level in many organizations. Of course, there are some exceptions which are kind of great at data analytics, but in general, HR as a function hasn't really reached the evolution and the maturity where data is being used to drive a lot of decisions.
I would. I think there are both yes and no over there, Nishit, because let's look at the two functions that have probably led the adoption of technology, right? And that's been HR and finance to a large extent, right? And banking and financial services really has been at the forefront of adoption of both of these. Now, there's a long way to go over there, but I think it would be unfair to say that we haven't got that there yet. I think what's not been done is really looking at data and collecting all of this data that we had over a period of time and really mining it for insights, right? That I think that piece we are evolving in. And that comes back to the point on interconnectedness because several of these systems were basically systems that stood in isolation to each other. And as and when you buy technology, you buy these really large, these licenses, and you say that, okay, first I'm going to implement one module, then I'm going to go to the next module, and then I'm going to the next module. And by the time you finish all of it, you're so exhausted. You're like, you know what, let me just not do all of this. I don't know what the value was. But instead, if we actually looked at it from saying that I'll use a solution which is agile and which sort of serves a basic need. It doesn't matter if my base system of record is, it could be whatever my system of record was. But then I start layering all of these other applications on top of it. That's a very different way to look at things. And then you can start mining for insights. Like your application too sits on top of something else, right? So it's mining from that, right? I think that's one of the things that we've got to see things differently. And there is a ton of really really valuable insights in over there. So for example, I'll give you an example. Um, in my current company, we used to process payroll and pay people by the 7th of the next month, right? Now this is perfectly fine. It is there, perfectly legal, perfectly fine. Because, and why was this? Because it was a purely manual process, right? And all the inputs would go, and then two people would sit down, and then they would compile it, then Excel sheet, and then they'd put it into a software that returned the same data, and then again they'd look at it, and then they'd make the bank transfer. So this is a hugely manual process. No one ever looked at the fact that this was impeding the employee experience because you have school bills to pay, you have school fees to pay, you have your EMI to take care of, you have other such necessities. And how do you go ahead and elevate that experience by simply making sure that we can move this by say 10 odd days? It seems kind of frivolous that such an example even exists, but there are several companies even today where it's not because they don't want to do it, it's primarily because it's never been viewed that way. And so we've been able to really bring it down, use technology, and say, this is a problem that was solved say 25 years ago, so let's just use that.
This reminds me, in one of my jobs, we were paying the final settlement after 60 days,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was a very manual process, as you said, that there was assets of the company that had to be returned, and a lot of things had to be done and checked off. And our CEO kind of once got a complaint from someone that
Yeah.
it's fair that it takes 60 days, and the CEO was shocked that it takes 60 days, and he says, "Your target is the last working day."
Yeah.
And we actually kind of went down investigating what is it that is taking time. We involve people from the process mapping customer excellence team, so that's where we kind of got specialists in lean and Six Sigma in the process. And the first thing they said is, let's draw a process map, and we need paper. And he said, okay, here's two kind of pieces of A4. So no, two pieces of A4 won't be enough. Let's go to a conference room, cover
Yeah.
the entire wall with
Yeah.
paper, and then let's draw. How many steps do you think you'll have? 12 steps, 15 steps? By the time we finished, we had 120 steps. So even looking at a process deeply and then
Mm-hmm.
finding out what is waste and removing it. And
Mm-hmm.
this is absolutely what leads to experience. So we were able to kind of come down from 60 days to 0 days just by kind of getting the process aligned properly, and obviously enabling that using the right technology, not fancy technology, just regular technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and we always say that experience is the intersection of culture, process, and technology. So a lot of
Absolutely.
people kind of think a shiny new app is what gets the experience going, but before you get to the shiny new app, you have to get to the process, and before you get to the process, you've got to get to the culture, which
Yeah,
is not.
and this is exactly what the transformation journey is all about, right?
Yeah,
Because you're essentially what you're saying is that it's not really about perfection. No one's really going for perfection. What you're trying to do over here is go for speed and say you use the Pareto everywhere. And you say, if I've done most of it, then it should be all right. It's not about going for perfection.
yeah, yeah. So coming back on Winnie as a consumer
Mm-hmm.
organization.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, consumer organizations have always been at the forefront of customer experience because that's what they're like really good at.
Mm-hmm.
Have you started taking some of the practices
Mm-hmm.
from what the company is doing to the customers and started applying it to what your
Mm-hmm.
internal customers
Oh yes, oh
would-
yes, oh yes, oh man.
okay?
All right, so Vinny, as you know, is a disruptive market leader in the personal care space, right? And we have to make sure at all points in time that everyone's pulling in the same direction. And over 90% of our workforce today is distributed, it's diverse, and it's frontline, right? And which means that anything that we conceptualize in, say, the corporate office has to very quickly trickle down. It has to be understood the way it has to be understood, and has to be tested for loss in translation as well, which means that I can't have a one size fits all communication. I can't send out one email or one communication on, on my People Strong application or anything like that and say, you know what, it's all done. I have to have multiple touch points. And so, what do? We look at formal communication via a circular, through notes, easy to access at a central repository, one to many and many to one kind of things through Microsoft Teams, and in-person connects, right? For example, one of the we have a quarterly sales leadership connect that we
Mhm.
have. It's called Vini Vartalap. Now, Vartalap actually is a Hindi Sanskrit word, which means conversation or dialogue. And when we started, we said this will be a virtual Vartalap, and anyone across the country can log into a Teams ID, and they can ask any question of the sales leadership. So it's a very informal kind of a thing. First time we launched something like this, there was, as you can imagine, a lot of chaos, a lot of cacophony, and a lot of awkwardness because people were like, "How do you even ask the question to the sales head?" And they didn't want to be the first one asking that question, saying, "What if I sound not as polished as I want to sound?" Right? But surely and slowly, we have certainly got to the point where we've had over 950 associates all dial in, feel extremely comfortable with the whole experience, and ask questions. They post their questions on the chat box. We compile all of them, then we send them the answers. So yeah, we're starting to do that, and that's how we're leveraging communication tools.
And I'm sure this is kind of having a transformative impact on the culture of the organization as well, right?
Absolutely. Because it's a two-way street, right? We are moving from a centralized kind of style to saying that everyone's involved in this journey and we all need to know what we need to know to pull in the same direction.
And has it also positively impacted performance in a way because people have more access to the leaders, they can ask questions, you're using various forms of communication, because eventually one of the questions that we always end up with is what's the ROI of doing all of this, and that's, I'm sure, with the changes that you've been bringing in, uh, I'm sure there's something to show at the end of it.
So I'll give you an example, right? And we are PE owned, majorly PE owned. So there is a certain time frame in which we need to deliver our investment thesis, which means that all the goals need to be well defined, communicated, and collaborated on actively. So we have to, at all points in time, you need to use an agile and non-conventional way to, get what we need to do. So our meetings are outcome focused. And one of the meetings that our CFO chairs, it's called the Growth Day meeting, right? It happens once every month, where all cross-functional leaders and teams, they come together. There is a set of initiatives that each one of us has signed up for. It's published to everyone, and we have to talk about our progress against that. And then all of this, the inputs of where we are on that entire timeline are actually collated. It's on this living document that's posted for everyone to see. And so it's like a red, amber, green, so where we are on this, and if there are any challenges that anyone is facing, any support that they require. So it's an open meeting where you're actually asking those questions, right? Now, that, to me, that is and there's clear value there. So there is a dollar value of what any initiative actually means. So if it's not core to what we are trying to do, it doesn't find mention there, right? So you're really eliminating so much of this discussion is more about eliminating what doesn't need to be done and really focusing on the critical few that need to get to where we are, because our time frame is really short. And as you can see, so we've taken a slightly different approach to the whole concept of engagement, where we're saying that let's blend this into our ways of working, as opposed to doing engagement as an activity outside of work. And I think, and it's cross-functional effort, and so that's what's working for us.
And I think that's a great way of looking at it, because in a lot of organizations that I speak with, engagement is seen as a metric
Mm-hmm.
rather than as a way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have, I've got a target to increase engagement from X to Y, and that's
Mm-hmm.
committed to the board. I need to do it. And let's do a survey, and let's do something around it, and let's do
Mm-hmm.
some activities, take people out for movies. But unless we get deeper into the changes of the ways of working,
Mm-hmm.
unlikely that real engagement will ever come out.
Mm-hmm.
So, in your HR process, your
Mm-hmm.
kind of strategy, do
Mm-hmm.
you have a formal employee experience kind of a um, team or a vertical or a process, or is it something that everyone is owning up?
Everyone owns it, because our HR team, in fact, our ratio of HR to business is so astoundingly, what should I say, competitive, right? Um, because we have a very, very lean team in HR. The idea is, we set process, we set the structure, we enable those discussions to take place, we build the programs. But really, the people who are actually having those conversations and are actually living all of this are the managers, right? So we've taken a very self-help approach to all of it. Um, and we've shown them the way to go ahead and build the whole blend it into the ways of working. So that's how we've approached the whole
Right.
engagement piece, right? That's also very similar to the way we've looked at our DEI strategy.
Mhm.
Now, for us, while DEI has been, to one extent, it's been, having a metric and saying that we will look at gender diversity and stuff like that. We've also said that a large part of our workforce today, probably gets excluded from having access to financial products, which are available at a certain income and above,
Yeah.
right? So we've made that possible.
Mhm.
So we've taken financial inclusion as one of the pillars of our strategy and say, if I enable people, either through healthy bodies, healthy minds, or the fact that they have access to certain information which they would have not otherwise have had, that's my way of building engagement, right? So it's not really an interruption to work, but along work itself, and that's how we're building it.
Fantastic. Uh, if you if you start talking to someone who is on day one of their HR career today,
Mm-hmm.
what would you tell them on how to approach their career within HR?
Okay. I would say approach HR from the lens of ways of working, and not as a thing that you do, right, or a set of activities that you do. And second, I would say leverage technology across every interaction, because there's so much that you can glean through the entire interaction. And I'll give you an example over here, right? Um, we started, in our journey, um, we said, how do we build engagement in a company that has probably never actually seen? There were several new people coming in, several old, people who have tenure also within the company and all of that. How do you put everyone together? How that was a problem statement. How do you sort of get everyone on the same page? And there's so many new people joining everywhere, and they're joining in all these locations across India. How do you say something beyond just saying, "Oh, hello, somebody," and you've joined today? How do you make this alive? And so we were discussing this, and our operations director, in fact, stood up and he said, "Let's do something around food." Right. And the idea really came from saying, you think back to the best parts of your weekend or your childhood. Maybe the best memories are around, the kitchen table or on the patio or in the yard with your friends and family over food, right? That's the best conversation. So we said, how do we build engagement around food? So on the second Wednesday of every month at 5 p.m., right? Across all locations, people get together, and they get together on something with a sweet, a karam, and a coffee. Karam in South in Tamil and in Telugu is a spicy or a savory, right? So you decide what your sweet, your spicy, your savory
Balanced,
is,
balanced
and
evening snack.
or your coffee or whatever, chai or whatever it is. You get it together, you have it with your team member. It's just 30 minutes of informal chit chat. We share stories, we talk about the organization development, who's joined this the month, who's had a birthday this month. Sort of have an informal 30-minute, and at the end of it, all the teams sort of take a picture, and they send it to us, and we're building this giant digital collage of people having all kinds of things across the company. To me, that's like a living example of how you blend something core to, what each one of us does, and then uses technology to go ahead and build it all together.
I used to do something very similar in my last corporate role. So we used to have it. I think it was also the first Wednesday of the month because it was midweek and
Right.
it was busy. And the whole kind of motto was the team that eats together stays together.
Absolutely, right?
And yeah, guards drop, people are talking, and you get to see a different side of someone's
Yeah,
personality.
yeah, yeah.
And it kind of breaks the ice and brings the team together. So yeah, these are the small things that can make a big difference. And
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
we don't need to bring in management theory and everything, but small actions, thoughtful actions, compassion, these kind of bring people together.
Absolutely,
Any
well said.
any closing words, Manisha, on how to improve engagement and experience overall in organizations?
I think you said it, Nishid, when you said that approach things with empathy and approach things with as genuinely as you can, right? Because I think honesty, humility, empathy are still values that HR will always be custodians of. And as people, we will probably be in a, that would be the advantage that we have over any tech that comes in. And if we can actually focus on those, as opposed to getting mired in the fancy jargon or the fancy kind of shiny technology, I think we're all right.
That's wonderful. And that's the kind of conversation I've been having recently, talking to almost hundreds of HR people in the last 1 month on how generative AI is going to change the ways we work. And I get different kinds of responses, ranging from, if AI can do all of this, what will we do?
Mm-hmm.
All the way to maybe half the HR team will lose their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And the standard response I try and give them is, the AI can be fantastic at computation. It doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
empathy. It doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
compassion. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know how to build relationships and inspire people. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of getting consumed in the routine, it is the opportunity for us as a profession to rise above the routine and start displaying more of what we are capable of. So basically, defragment the cognitive hard disk and start focusing on why we were created rather
Oh, I
than
love it.
doing stupid
Cognitive
stuff.
hard disk. Yes, I'm stealing that from you.
Great. Manisha, thank you so much. Great talking to you as always.